What circumstances did you realize that there are problems with the mountains?
2013 Kedarnath incident.
जून 2013 उत्तराखंड में उस समय मूसलाधार बारिश हो रही थी। चौराबाड़ी ग्लेशियर उसी समय पिघल गया, जिसका नतीजा ये हुआ कि मंदाकिनी अपनी तेज लहरों के साथ विकराल रूप लेकर नीचे की तरफ आना शुरू हो गई।
What do you think caused the 2013 Kedarnath? What got you particularly interested in Ladakh?
Yeah.
And why should people living in Bombay, Delhi worry about Ladakh? It's too far.
Where most of the India gets the rainfall during the monsoon time. Okay.
Yeah.
Ladakh doesn't get that. And that's why Ladakh is also known as the rain shadow area. There's a village in Zanskar region of Ladakh that is completely abundant now. People have migrated from those villages to other places.
So considering fast forward a few years when maximum glaciers disappear, then our only source of water will be rainwater?
Hi, this podcast is with Tirthankar Ghosh. He's a glaciologist, and in this podcast, he's covering all topics that concern you and me as a common man. So let's go for it.
But do you remember when would you, in what circumstances did you realize that there are problems with the mountains?
Yeah, I remember like one striking incident that comes to my mind right now is 2013 Kedarnath incidents. So I was probably in 10th standard at that point, and that was a huge, breaking news that happened that there was one glacial lake that broke due to a GLOF incident, and that has wiped down the complete Kedarnath valley. And it was a huge destruction. I remember I still have actually the images are floating in front of my eyes, like what kind of destruction it was. And so that probably questioned my interests as well during the school time. So I was reading in the newspapers and television news, everything. Obviously I was not accustomed with the technical terms like GLOF and a glacial lake outburst flood. What is it, why it is actually happening? So that's when you read, and at that point of time, and when you're in school, you're studying a little bit of geography, you're getting to know the physics, what's happening, you know a little bit about environment, you know what is global warming. So you are able to connect these dots and maybe try to make a vague picture of what could happen. But now probably I'm getting into more details on these things, and that's probably one of the incident that's got into my
Stayed on
head.
your
And
mind.
exactly, yeah.
So now that you know things more deeply in that,
Yeah.
what do you think caused that, the 2013 Kedarnath?
So usually what happens is when we talk about glacial lake outburst flood,
Yeah,
so as the term signifies that there is a glacial lake. So usually what happens when the glaciers recedes,
yeah.
and usually the glaciers are sitting on rocks. So whenever they recede back, they usually leave a cavity kind of a shape or a bowl like structure. And when these glaciers melts, so those melt waters tends to collect. Yeah, so
Okay.
it's like a basin which has a very short leakage point. I mean, a small stream coming out of that basin. Mostly it's getting collected in that.
Hmm.
Sometimes there is a natural barrier that happens. If we call it like a natural moraine dammed lake. Moraines are like the debris or the rocks or the soil that the glaciers pushed forward, and now that the glaciers have receded, but still these moraines are there, and that acts as a barrier to that glacial lake, so that the water doesn't come out completely, and there is a small outlet from that lake. So usually what happens is like there is a capacity of holding the volume of water these lakes could hold, and beyond a certain limit these lakes are not able to hold that thing. And what happens is the natural dams that is there, because of their instability or some geotechnical aspect, those dams usually breaks off. And when it breaks, this water comes out like a rushing flood event, and we call it like a flash flood, like too much of water coming down in a shorter period of time, and that leads to more destruction rather than you're having rainfall for a long time and slowly the rivers are going up in level. But if you have a huge amount of water coming down in a very short span, that will be much more destructive. So that was the main reason, and that carried out as well along with a heavy rainfall event. So probably that led to the destabilization of the moraine in front that was damming the lake. So once the moraine got instabilized, it broke off and the water completely rushed through. And the topography is always, it's like that. If you let water flow on a higher rugged topography, if the slope is very high,
Yeah.
obviously the water will rush in a very high speed,
Yeah.
and that will actually take off whatever comes in front of it. So that's what we saw in the Kedarnath incident, and this is happening in most of the region. If you see 2023 in South Lonark Glacier, that's in Sikkim,
Hmm.
a similar thing happened.
Hmm.
So it was a huge destruction again. Like we had so many hydropower dams, so those were damaged, and then a lot of villages and the towns that were along the river valleys, it was completely wiped out. So these things are like happening in a very higher frequency nowadays. Yeah. But research are always, it's the people are doing research on this, and they try to mark these lakes, like which are probably they could have a disaster in the future, or based on how much volume the lakes are holding. But sometimes we do lack taking action and doing something before something happens. Because if you are able to signify that these glacial lakes are like potentially hazardous lake, as we say,
Hmm.
this could lead to some hazard in future.
Hmm.
Governments need to, they need to take action before something happens. We are always like, okay, something has happened now, think of what we can do in future to stop.
Stop
So
later.
yes, yeah,
It is quite predicted. It is like
yes,
the
yes,
science is capable of
yes,
predicting that this particular glacial lake could burst out. That's
yep,
there, right? So
absolutely.
actually, and there are and we know how to control that. Like we know, like if actions were to be taken, do we have
Yes, there
something?
are few measures. There are few measures like those proved to be, working in different parts of the world. Even if you consider Nepal as one of our neighboring country, there are many glaciers in their country. They
Yeah.
have, potentially curbed down the effect of a hazard in future by taking some measures. So usually, those are always not working, but at least they are trying to reduce down the potential of, this lake hazard that could take place.
Hmm.
So you need to siphon out water at regular intervals. That is costly, I understand. But uh, if that could save, just for an example, if that could save you 10,000 rupees, if you're spending 500 rupees, then why not to do that?
Exactly.
Right? Because some hazard after effects will cost you billions of dollars or rupees, to get back into that previous landscape, building the houses, the infrastructures
And
you
a lot
had on
of
those
it,
rivers.
lot of it will never get recovered. Never,
Never
no
get recovered.
payment.
Exactly, exactly.
And
It's
the
beyond tipping
family,
points, we say, right? It will not get recovered back again at its previous states. Even I could just tell you one incident, the 2023 event that happened, South
huh.
Lonark Lake. A paper was there in 2020 that was published 2020, or
Hmm.
maybe around 2019-20. It already signified that as a potentially hazardous lake, and that was one of the major hazardous lake in the Sikkim region. But still, we couldn't do anything, and the hazard happened. Now we're thinking, oh, we should have gone by the research. So like that's a problem, like translating data into executable information.
Hmm.
That's a issue. It's not only in India. If you take other countries as well, it's a similar pattern that's there. So the data
Yeah.
sets are there, but people who tend to take information, they're not utilizing it for executable processes.
It
Yeah,
is common sense, right? You are sitting in a position wherein you're taking decisions which will
right.
be affected for lakhs and lakhs of people in a country like India,
Yes,
with a
yes,
population. I am, in all fairness, I feel they must be consulting the experts. It can't
exactly.
be so dumb and out also in today's time that, it's like
Yes,
not fair to say that kuch nahi kar rahe. But
exactly.
still, what are they consulting? What are they reading? What are their limitations in going further if this is what your job is? So,
Exactly. Every state has their own responsive state disaster management authority. So they are looking to these aspects. If you take the mountain states,
hmm,
what are the natural disaster that happens around? So it's like landslides.
yeah,
It could be landslides due to cloud bursts. It could be flash floods. It could be GLOFs, which we just discussed.
yeah,
So these are the main natural calamities that takes place in those states. So
yeah,
most of the states or nearby states are having their own research institutes. You say IITs or some other research institutes they have. Usually geographic location of those institutes tend to focus on that geography. Like if some institutes are there in Eastern India, say IIT Guwahati or some other institutes, they will be focusing on regional aspects.
Yeah.
So what's happening in Arunachal Pradesh, what's happening in Assam. If some institutes are there in Sikkim or West Bengal, they will try to focus on what's happening in the Sikkim or nearby region. So just consult with them and try to understand what are the problems and what are the things we should be focusing on in near future. So they could make a plan out of that, kind of a blueprint.
So, what got you particularly interested in Ladakh,
Yeah.
and why should people living in Bombay, Delhi, metros, or
Hmm.
even Lucknow or
Yeah,
smaller,
yeah,
why should anybody worry about
yeah.
Ladakh? It's too far.
Yeah. So coming to the first part of the question, why I was interested in Ladakh. So I'll just give a brief description of how the Ladakh, the geography is and the topography. So Ladakh is such a place. If you see at the topographical map, so there's like we have Himalayan range, right? It's a huge range of mountains. We say starting from the Kashmir region to the Arunachal side. It's like a chain of mountains.
Yeah.
Ladakh is a place that's beyond these Himalayan regions. So we call this place a trans-Himalayan region. So because of the Himalayan ranges, what happens is like the Indian summer monsoon that we have, where most of the India gets the rainfall during the monsoon time. Okay,
Yeah.
Ladakh doesn't get that. That's because these huge mountains do not allow these clouds to pass over, and that's why Ladakh is also known as the rain shadow area. So it receives very less rainfall. It's
Right.
completely dry, and the landscape is very barren. If you see some pictures as compared to other parts of Himachal Pradesh or Himalayas, any part you take it, most of the Himalayas are like green, lush green, except the higher elevations they will have rocky mountains. But Ladakh is mostly like that, and the landscape is very different as compared to the other places. The glaciers there, uh, those are also different as compared to the glaciers in other regions because they do not get the snowfall during the monsoon time. And since it's a rain shadow area, that the agricultural that most of the states takes place, the Punjab or West Bengal. So they are completely dependent on the monsoon,
Yeah.
the maximum rainfall that we get. They do not have that rainfall.
Hmm.
So what are they dependent on? They're dependent on the meltwater that's coming from these glaciers. So these glaciers, when they are melting, they are getting into the streams,
Huh.
and these streams are going, flowing through the valley. And if you see any map or any image, all the landscape villages are completely built on the river valleys. That's absolutely on the valley of the rivers. So you take any village in Leh, you see the Leh city. That's in a valley where most of the small streams are coming and getting collected into the Indus River. That's the major lifeline that flows through the Ladakh region. And there are small streams, those caters to other small villages. And any village in Ladakh region is completely dependent on either glacier water
Yeah.
that's coming from the glaciers or the snow that's melting during the summertime. So, and if you say how people are affected downstream, or people we are staying so away, far away from the glaciers, you can say any parts of the Himalayas. Why
Yeah.
not? Why only Ladakh?
Hmm.
So first of all, obviously the magnitude of effect is highest who are completely dependent on them, right? The people in staying in the mountain regions,
Yeah.
because as I said, most of the people are completely dependent on the meltwater of these glaciers. So if the glaciers are melting, some places will have reduced amount of water in later half. And I can say with facts that in some villages in Ladakh, there are some small glaciers. There were some small glaciers. So those small glaciers completely vanished. It shrinked. So the stream that was coming down and catering to the village downstream, the stream is not there anymore. So how will these villages sustain? They will
Yeah.
not be able to sustain, right? So I can tell you some villages name like Kumik. There's a village in Zanskar region of Ladakh that is
Uh-huh.
completely abundant now. People have migrated from those villages to other places because they have no water. How will they, sustain with their daily life? They have nothing. They cannot completely depend on snow because snow is seasonal. And snow melt water, whatever the snow is melting, that usually melts in the early summer season. By May it will go. What about the rest of the time? So the major part is like these glaciers when melt, they come to the rivers, and obviously, if you know, the river slowly goes into the oceans,
Yeah.
right? And one of the major reason of ocean sea level rise, or we say the increasing sea level rise, is from the glacier meltwater. The other part is from the warming up of ocean water. We say that water expands due to warming up.
Yeah.
That's obviously happening again frequently because the global temperatures are increasing. But another major reason why the oceans are, getting swelled up, that's because the glaciers are melting at a rapid rate, and this meltwater obviously runs down to the oceans. So what happens now is, in the coastal regions, if let's say about the coastal areas right now, like cities like Mumbai, Kolkata, or some other regions, like we have a huge network of mangrove forests called the Sundarbans in West Bengal. So whenever there is a tidal flood happening, or there is a rise in the sea levels, there is one due to the natural shift that is happening, and another is the added signal of from these glacial melts that are adding to the the sea waters.
Yeah.
In 60 to 70 years, some two-third of the Mumbai might get washed off when these tidal events happens. Not always, but when this tidal flood happens, this Mumbai will be covered up by with the two-third of the area of the Mumbai. I'll come to another aspect. If you think about, there is a word called climate migration.
Mm-hmm.
Just a simple thing I explained, when that the glaciers are no more there in that small region, people are going from that place to another. So that's climate migration. People have no choice than to relocate to a different place where they will again get those water availability, the land to agriculture. They need a fertile land to do agriculture, and if
Basic.
water is not, yeah, that those are the basic things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that's not there, and say now happening in one or two villages, maybe in future it could happen in all across Himalayas, all across Ladakh, the streams drying up. There will be problems in generation of electricity who depends upon hydroelectricity powers.
Exactly.
If there is no water to run the turbines in your hydroelectric power generators, how will you cater people downstream? And most of the North Indian states are dependent on hydropower electricity. So that's a major problem. So we should be concerned because of these many things. Even if we are directly not getting impacted, indirectly we will be having so many problems we don't know yet. So that's the thing.
So, considering fast forward a few years when
Mhm.
maximum glaciers disappear,
Yep.
then our only source of water will be rainwater,
Yeah. Yeah.
rain and
Yes.
snow.
Rain and snow. And what happens is also snow is also changing a little bit.
Mm.
So one thing is like, say for example, we say something called snow line. So there's a particular elevation till which snowfall happens,
Mm.
and below that, since the climate is warmer, when the snow falls, it obviously gets converted into a rainfall particle. So that's the simple physics we understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
That snow line is also, going up and
Up,
up. It's
up.
climbing the elevation,
Mm.
because whatever was happening at, say for example, 3000 meters,
Mm.
that kind of warming is now happening at, say, 3500 meters. So there is a term called peak water. I'll try to explain in a very simple language. So
Yeah.
as we say peak water, like there will be a peak in the water that's coming out from these glaciers.
Mm.
So as we go into future, so right now we are in 2025, and some studies say
Mm.
say around 2090 or 2100, there will be glaciers losing mass around 50 to 60% for case in the Himalayan region. So this has a lot of uncertainties as well. It's not like definite that this will happen, but considering that uncertainty ranges, say 50 to 60% of the glaciers will lose mass. So what happens is, when the glaciers are losing mass, since it's coming down as a meltwater into these rivers, as and when the glaciers loses mass, the higher it goes, it tends to leave more water, like the meltwater will be much higher. Okay,
Mm.
so the graph glows something like this. It takes a peak, and again it slows down. Why is it slowing down? Because there is no much ice left to cater the rivers, so it's
Oh.
slowing down. So there will be a peak at some point, so that's
Huh.
called the peak water. And again the peak will go down, because there is not much ice left in the glacier, so that the meltwater will come down is much less. So the
Mm.
volume of water that's coming down to the major rivers will come down as we go into future, as the glaciers are losing mass.
But two questions, and you answered them as well. When you were saying that, like about these expeditions that you go to, I was wondering about the porters, the
Mhm.
local people that go with you. Do they share some information which we should know?
हर साल जब हम लोग जाते हैं मनाली
Hmm.
से ऊपर, तो दूसरे दूसरे जगह से आते हैं द शेफर्ड्स वहां पर ग्रेजिंग के लिए. सो
Huh.
मोस्टली शिप्स रहता है उन लोगों के पास. तो आई मेट वन गाय, एक शेफर्ड को मैं मिला हर साल, उसी टाइम पीरियड में वो आते हैं उसी पर्टिकुलर प्लेस में,
Huh.
द ग्लेशियर वेयर वी गो. उसके आसपास बहुत सारा ग्रासलैंड्स है लोअर एलिवेशंस में।
हम्म,
तो उस समय लास्ट ईयर भी मिला, एंड 2023 में जब हम लोगों के साथ ये स्नोफॉल वाला इंसिडेंट हुआ था तब भी मैं उसी साथ मिला था।
हम्म,
तो उसको मैंने पूछा कि आप लोग कैसे हैम्पर्ड हो रहे हो, ये जो अचानक से स्नोफॉल हो रहा है या फिर स्नोफॉल नहीं हो रहा है, या
हाँ,
फिर ग्लेशियर ऊपर रिसीड होके जा रहा है, तो
हाँ,
नदिया का फ्लो थोड़ा चेंज हो रहा है, तो उसमें आप लोग का ग्रास लैंड्स में या फिर जो ग्रासेस आप लोग ऊपर चढ़ने के लिए जाते हैं एनिमल्स को लेके, उसमें कुछ डिफरेंसेस आ रहे हैं कि नहीं।
हाँ,
तो बोले कि साहब जी एक चीज तो बहुत समझ में आ रहा है लास्ट 10-15 साल से,
हम्म,
कि जो पानी बारिश के टाइम होता है रेनफॉल
हम्म,
या फिर द स्नोफॉल जो होता है, जो बर्फ गिरता है, वो तो ऐसा नहीं है कि जो 20-25 साल पहले गिरता था उतना तो होता नहीं है,
हम्म,
एंड ऊपर से कब होगा और नहीं होगा ये भी हमें नहीं पता चलता है।
हम्म,
तो हम लोग जून महीने में आते हैं, सितंबर अक्टूबर तक रुकते हैं, फिर से बर्फ गिरने से पहले हम लोग वापस चले आते हैं अपने गाँव।
हम्म,
तो वो अभी डिफरेंसेस आ चुका है, क्योंकि कभी भी जून महीने में भी बारिश हो रहा है नहीं हो रहा है, कभी बर्फ भी गिर रहा है नहीं हो रहा है। तो उसमें क्या हो रहा है कि हम लोग का जो ग्रासलैंड्स है वो कभी कभी उसका एलिवेशन में भी चेंज हो रहा है, मतलब उसमें जो हाइट में वो ग्रासेस होता था वो शायद हो रहा है कि अभी थोड़ा ऊपर हो रहा है, या फिर वो ग्रासेस ठीक से हो ही नहीं रहा है क्योंकि वो स्नोफॉल ठीक ढंग से नहीं हुआ था,
हम्म,
तो वो नरिशमेंट नहीं मिल रहा है। तो उन लोगों को डिफरेंट डिफरेंट लोकेशन स्काउट करना पड़ रहा है, नया लोकेशन, क्योंकि यूजुअली क्या होता है ना, ये शेफर्ड्स लोगों का एक पर्टिकुलर रूट होता है, लाइक
हाँ,
एवरी रीजन हैज देयर ओन रूट।
राइट,
इसी टाइम पे जाएंगे, उसी लोकेशन में जाएंगे, वही वैली में हम लोगों को चढ़ने जाना है। लाइक
हाँ,
इफ यू से अबाउट स्पीति में, लद्दाख में, हर एक शेफर्ड्स का अलग 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 पर्टिकुलर रीजन है, तो हम लोग इसी साल इधर ही जाएंगे।
हम्म,
तो इन लोगों का पर्टिकुलर वही लोकेशन रहता है हर साल
हम्म,
आने का।
हम्म,
बट 5-6 साल में देख रहे हैं कि ये लोग लैंडस्केप थोड़ा डिफरेंट आ रहा है, तो अभी इन लोगों को और ऊपर जाना पड़ रहा है। ऊपर जाने के कारण कभी कभी हो गया कि ऊपर चला तो गया बट अचानक से स्नोफॉल हो गया, ठीक है, एंड देन उसमें क्या हुआ कि इन लोगों का शिप्स आर डाइंग बिकॉज ऑफ द एराटिक स्नोफॉल, अचानक से मर जा
हाँ,
रहे हैं क्योंकि ये लोग सह नहीं पा रहे वो टेम्परेचर्स।
सही नहीं कर सकते, हाँ,
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 और अचानक से कुछ भी होगा तो इट्स वेरी डिफरेंट, राइट। दे डू
हाँ,
नॉट हैव शेड, वहां पर कोई छाव नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है, सोचा
कहाँ
था कि
रहेगी,
सुबह जाएंगे शाम तक वापस आएंगे फिर नेक्स्ट दिन वापस आ जाएंगे।
हम्म, आ ही
तो
नहीं पाए,
ये डिफरेंसेस आ रहे हैं, आ नहीं पा रहे। यस,
हम्म,
एंड ये फर्स्ट हैंड अकाउंट मैंने उनसे लिया था क्योंकि मैं उनको लास्ट टाइम फिर से देखा, 2023 में उनको देखा था, तो मैं सोचा कि इनसे एक एक्सपीरियंस ऑब्वियसली मेरे को मिलेगा, क्योंकि मैं तो
हाँ,
आ रहा हूँ लास्ट 2-3-4 साल से आ रहा हूँ, 3 साल से मैक्सिमम जा रहा हूँ।
ये तो
तो
यहीं
इनके
के
पास
रहने के हैं,
यहीं के रहने वाले हैं, और इनको क्या है ना कि एक्सपीरियंसेस होता रहता है, क्योंकि ये लोग हर साल इसी लैंडस्केप में आता है। अलग अलग जगह पे जाएंगे तो हो सकता है कि डिफरेंट ज्योग्राफी है, डिफरेंट लैंडस्केप होगा, बट क्योंकि पर्टिकुलरली हर साल ये लोग इधर ही आ रहे हैं, सो दे हैव अ वेरी गुड कमांड ऑन कि बारिश कैसा होगा,
या,
बर्फ किस टाइम गिरता है, और किस टाइम ये लोग वापस चले जाएगा। तो वो मौसम में भी चेंजेस आ रहा है, एंड द लैंडस्केप ग्रास एरियाज जो था, ग्रासलैंड में भी डिफरेंसेस आ रहे हैं, पर्टिकुलर जो वेजिटेशन और जो ग्रास ये लोग खाते हैं वो शायद नहीं हो पा रहे, वो कहीं और हो रहा है, लैंडस्केप ऊपर एलिवेशंस में हो रहा है, एंड देन ऊपर जाएगा तो और भी प्रॉब्लम्स है, अचानक से स्नोफॉल हो गया तो पता नहीं क्या होगा। इन 2023 आई रिमेम्बर, आई थिंक उनका कुछ 10-15 शिप डाइड क्योंकि अचानक से इतना स्नोफॉल हो गया, एंड इनका लाइवलीहुड ही चलता है पूरा इसी टाइम पीरियड के ऊपर। ये ग्रेजिंग टाइम पीरियड विल केटर दी ऑल अक्रॉस द ईयर। तो
और उसका ऑल्टरनेटिव, उसका तो कुछ भी ऑल्टरनेटिव भी कैसे हो सकता है, वो
ऑल्टरनेटिव नहीं है।
नेचुरली खाएंगे तो ही वो
एग्जैक्टली,
जिएंगे ना,
एग्जैक्टली, ऑल्टरनेटिव नहीं है। तो ये मेरा एक बहुत रिच एक्सपीरियंस हुआ था, एंड उसके ऊपर मैंने एक लास्ट ईयर आर्टिकल लिखा था कि स्नोफॉल पैटर्न जो चेंज हो रहा है हिमालय पे,
हम्म,
वो अ, एक तो ये लोकल शेपर्ड्स को एक इफेक्ट कर रहा है, और
हम्म,
ग्लेशियर्स को तो इम्पैक्ट है ही,
करेक्ट,
क्योंकि मैंने आई थिंक लास्ट वी सेड दैट ग्लेशियर्स हेल्थ इज completely dependent upon the snowfall.
हम्म,
So if there is less amount of snowfall, there is less positive accumulation that's happening.
राइट,
So glaciers are not happy in that case. एंड सेम केस विद दीज पीपल। तो अगर एराटिक स्नोफॉल होगा या फिर अचानक से मार्च में स्नोफॉल नहीं हो रहा है, मई में स्नोफॉल हो रहा है, तो इन लोगों के लिए भी इट्स डेंजरस, इट्स नॉट सुटेबल फॉर दीज शिप्स और शेफर्ड्स। तो मैंने एक आर्टिकल उस पर लिखा था कि कैसे हिमालय रीजन पे चेंजेस आ रहा है ओवर द लॉन्ग टाइम, एंड ये कैसे लोकल पीपल को अफेक्ट कर रहा है, एग्रीकल्चर पे भी अफेक्ट होता है,
ऑब्वियसली,
क्योंकि स्नोफॉल अगर डिफरेंसेस होगा तो जो स्नो मेल्ट वाटर आना था वो मई से, अगर 20 साल पहले वो मई से सितंबर तक केटर करता, एंड देन फिर से स्नोफॉल हो रहा है तो दे आर हैप्पी।
या,
बट अभी क्या है ना कि इधर अर्ली विंटर स्नोफॉल हो रहा है और नहीं तो लेट विंटर स्नोफॉल होगा, तो उसमें क्या है कि टेम्परेचर बढ़ रहा है, तो
बढ़ रहा है,
जो स्नो गिरा तो दैट्स मेल्टिंग अवे,
हाँ,
वो स्नो
वो
मेल्ट
काम
होकर चले जा रहे हैं। हाँ
काम का ही नहीं आ रहा है, वो
हाँ, वो एक एक 1.5 महीने में पूरा मेल्ट हो
पूरा
जाएगा।
मेल्ट हो गया।
तो मतलब जून जुलाई अगस्त सितंबर देयर इज नो वाटर, दे आर अगेन ओनली डिपेंडेंट ऑन ग्लेशियर्स।
Yeah. And tell me at a very fundamental, your and my level, that when हम जब बात कर रहे हैं कि emissions कम करना is the only way out, और उसी तरह से sustain कुछ कर सकता है, तो नॉर्मल आदमी कैसे अपने emissions कंट्रोल करे कि वो सिग्निफिकेंट इनफ हो? आई गिव यू अ कॉन्टेक्स्ट कि अगर अगर मैं एयर कंडीशनिंग 6 घंटा चलाती हूँ, राइट, तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि अगर 5 घंटे से कम में तो जी नहीं सकती हूँ, और 5 घंटे 1 घंटे में क्या ही हो जाएगा, यू नो, लाइक इन द होल स्कीम ऑफ थिंग्स. सो इज देयर सम डेटा दैट यू कैन हेल्प कॉमन पर्सन लाइक अस अंडरस्टैंड कि हम क्या करें?
So it comes to the very basic things, like you said that 1 hour reduce करेंगे तो क्या होगा,
हम्म.
but if you just multiply it with that 1 hour with the kind of population we have in the entire globe, because that's the reality. Whatever we are putting up on it in the atmosphere, it's also coming out from these kind of emissions, right? If you are doing a cycling ride as compared to we are taking a vehicle, or a four-wheeler vehicle for some, getting some things from a grocery store or something like that.
Hmm.
So that is what it's getting cumulatively added up to the sum of the amount of carbon dioxide emissions, or other kind of emissions the factories are doing. So one thing I would say, which translates into very practical solutions that we can do as general public.
Yeah.
Let's say what the policies would be, we don't know yet, or what will be in the larger aspects of
And we
climate
have no
policies.
control on that.
We have no control on that, but things which we can do is, like, if we can shift towards the renewable energies, like the alternate sources, like powering up your houses with the solar energies, or if you have your industries that could be powered up with wind energy or solar energy together,
Hmm.
not only completely dependent upon energy from coal, that's obviously putting up emission again. Or else we could slowly transit towards EV, the electric vehicles. Even though there are a lot of debates going on that if you say the whole circular economy of electric vehicles, that's probably in a positive carbon emission,
Yeah.
but that could definitely lead to lower amount of air pollution as well. And then again, it comes down to taking public vehicles. Just ride a bike to somewhere if you're going 10 minutes far away from your house. And then if you're working at an organization, try to go or move towards renewable energies. And then comes with the act of awareness, spreading awareness. If you are doing that, try to multiply it to 10 people more. If that 10 people will tell to 10 more people, that slowly, it spreads like it's like uh, a curve
It
that's like
becomes a
exponentially
chain.
increasing.
Becomes a chain. And
Yes, yes. So these things, even if it sounds very minute in level, we will say, अरे 1 घंटे में क्या हो जाएगा, अरे 5 मिनट तो है, थोड़ा गाड़ी लेके चले आएंगे, क्या दिक्कत है, या फिर एसी थोड़ा सा और चला लेते हैं, है ना. But if you see the cumulative effect of the number of populations we have, if you say India or globally, whatever, so that has a huge amount of effect in terms of the cumulative numbers that we get. Just for example, I was looking at some news article maybe 2 to 3 days back. There is one supermarket, though they are actually trying to get things from people in a radius of 100 kilometer, right? And they have also shifted to paper bags or biodegradable bags as compared to plastic bags. So two things they have done is to, the radius of work is 100 kilometers.
Right.
So whatever they're doing, they're not getting products from say 1500 2000 kilometers, or a vehicle is coming to serve them the products, or you are taking up airways to make exports of some products from other countries or some other places. That's one thing, you're reducing the carbon emissions. So it's like you're reducing the footprint of your business. And there's another thing, you're also trying to use some biodegradable bags where you're not using plastics. So that's again catering to the land pollutions, or some vehicles coming to, taking up your garbage and putting up in some landfills. So it is like somewhere it is connected. And if you see the numbers and cumulatively effect of these processes or the small changes that we make, it actually proves to be in a bigger scale. And since we do not get to understand that scale, we always see, अरे थोड़ा सा कर लेंगे तो क्या ही हो जाएगा. But
हाँ,
this थोड़ा सा
is
matters.
थोड़ा सा, but on the scale of our population, it is significant. as
It is
a,
significant. It
yeah.
is significant. Yeah, it is significant. And if we are able to do this, and if we are able to, translate it to more number of people, so that people are a little bit more careful about their whatever they're doing, say in metro cities or some other places, and if you stay a little bit simpler, right? Right, simpler means you try to avoid vehicle. If not necessary, don't take it. Okay, if necessary, then if you are able to shift your complete energy consumption to some lower energy consumption, like if you have an electric bulb that consumes less amount of energy, or if you have an air condition that has a lower rating of energy consumption. So these things matters. That's why these technologies are coming up, and there are more technologies coming up supporting these things.
Mm,
And another thing, if you talk at a larger scale, as I mentioned about the carbon capture technologies,
mm.
so this will come up in future. I am like very much hopeful on
But
this
you were
technology
talking
aspect.
about reducing the emission, and we have moved to quick commerce.
Yes,
We need everything in 8 minutes now.
right. We are not doing it. And I would also take this opportunity to let our audience know that this is the year of International Year of Glacier Preservation, and it was actually started by World Meteorological Organization and United Nation as
Mm,
two huge bodies, functioning at a global scale.
mm,
So the major reason to establish this year as the year of glacier preservation is it's something that the things are going out of control, and if we are not taking action at this level, or maybe in next 2 to 3 years, so it will be something that is irreversible. Like some places on the earth, the glaciers would be irreversible, right? So they are focusing much on the policy level changes,
mm.
and how local researchers or social scientists, or people who are interested in advocacy and climate awareness, they are gathering people to spread this message across the governments and the administrations, those who like needed to listen, and
Yes.
they need to take it very seriously and take action. And you see any big countries as well, like they are also not doing any good. There are small countries like Norway, Switzerland. These countries are doing really good, but
Brilliant.
still
Yeah.
there's a lot to do. And in terms of carbon emissions, the developing nations need to do a lot.
US, India, China. We are the ones. Like, we
Yeah,
have the massiveness that we have. Like, even if
absolutely.
Norway and Sweden does good, that's
Mhm.
such a small proportion of
Very.
the whole system.
Yes, yes.
Hmm. Also,
So
that
it's
reminds
a
me of the travel industry.
travel industry.
Like,
Yes, yes,
travel
yes.
earlier, when we were younger, travel was like an annual affair. One holiday that would, that
Hmm.
five people will travel to the scenic locations, right?
Yep.
Now, travel is Instagrammable, right? You travel for
Yes.
Instagram, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there are, and the amount of air that we use flying into that,
Hmm.
that's just because one can afford it, so to say, financially, bank
Yes,
wise.
yes.
That travel isn't the travel industry creating a huge amount of havoc on the basics.
It is creating havoc, first of all, and secondly, if we imagine the landscape that I was talking about 50, 60 years down the line, you see
Yeah.
the traveling industry is also getting impacted because of the change in the landscape. If people are not much interested into, they are not able to see the snow, they're not able to see the glaciers, they're not able to get the beautiful rivers in those landscape anymore, why will they travel back to the mountains?
Mm.
Yeah. So it has we are not able to understand or comprehend the influence of what we are doing today will happen in future, because we are yet to understand the magnitude of the problems and the kind of problems that might have. And
Mm.
we might have a list of problems if we go on discussing on these things, and
Yeah.
while discussing we might get another idea of another problem, right?
Mm.
So that is the situation.
आई थिंक यहाँ पे ना सोच की भी बात है कि हम बहुत शॉर्ट टर्म सोचते हैं.
शॉर्ट
ठीक
टर्म
है,
सोचते हैं,
आज
हाँ.
तो बर्फ है ना, तो आज चले जाते हैं.
सही बात है.
राइट. आज तो वहां पे रोड बना है, तो वहां पे हनीमून कपल्स को भेज देते हैं. राइट.
हाँ,
मतलब
हाँ.
आज का पैकेज सोच लो. बट
हम्म,
वो एक सोची थोड़ी सी चीज की, वो है, वो परमानेंट नहीं है. आप आज कमा लोगे, कल क्या
हम्म.
करोगे? लाइक यू सेइंग कि स्नो ही नहीं होगा, तो ट्रैवल से ज्यादा और क्या इफेक्ट होगा? वही
एग्जैक्टली.
देखने जाते हैं, बट वो लॉन्ग टर्म थिंकिंग ही नहीं है हमारी. आज no
लॉन्ग
छोड़
टर्म
सकते.
थिंकिंग नहीं, हाँ हाँ वही, मतलब इवन 5 years डाउन द लाइन हम लोग नहीं सोचते कि क्या हो
हाँ.
पाएगा.
You said that it started from your love for mountains started from the childhood. But
Yes,
let's break it down.
yes,
I am
yes.
I'm tempted to ask that probably were
Mhm.
there some conversations? Was there some information? What was it during those visits that was a
Yeah.
little more?
Yeah, I mean that's obviously one thing that I would love to share as well. So since I was a little bit into hiking and trekking, and I come from a place that's West Bengal, and many mountaineers and trekkers actually come from West Bengal. You have seen many mountaineers climbing mountains, people going to trekking. So this was also an opportunity to meet such people who would actually explain me, show the photographs. They have been to the places, so probably that's when I started to look at glaciers, like as a picture, as a photograph. So when I was going around the mountains, I was not aware of, hey, this is called glaciers. This particular landscape is known as this. I was not aware. I was only interested to see the landscape, how beautiful it is. And obviously, I was having questions about what are these, how these mountains are formed, how Himalayas are formed. So
Mm,
those questions were answered by my parents, but also I got an additional opportunity to interact with these people who have been to the mountains for a longer time.
mm.
And somehow probably I'm able to connect what I'm doing now with those conversations that happened much back.
When you studying glaciers, and it's out there, but how do you model a glacier?
Based on different data sets where we go to field, we tend to get some data set like how much the glaciers have melted, and also how thick the glaciers are. We use different geophysical understanding or instruments to infer how thick the glaciers are. And then we use some stakes, we drill into ice, put the stakes in and try to see the level of ice there, go back again next year at same time period and see how much the ice has lost, how much the melting has happened. So that can give us understanding of the glacier wide melting patterns, or if the snowfall is happening in the higher elevation, whether it is a positive melting or a negative melting happening. So yeah, these things are there to understand the glacier in much more detail.
And how long has India been active in understanding data, like data per
Yeah.
se?
So if we take into consideration the scenario in India, probably Geological Survey of India has been doing this work since a long time. So GSI is an organization probably 200 years. I'm not exactly sure about the date, but probably 200 years old as an organization. It started during the British ruling in India, and they did some independent work in various glaciers. It was very sparse, probably focusing on one or two glaciers, because there was no route to these glaciers. There was no trekking or hiking routes. So they used to explore these routes, and independent researchers used to find way to the glaciers by following the river trajectories. Because if you follow a river back, you will probably walk back to a glacier from where it's coming. So those
Yeah.
stories are also very interesting too. But probably GSI did some exploratory research in India,
Mhm.
and later on in 1960s 70s, slowly the research started around the glaciers, studying around glaciers, getting data on what I said, how the glaciers are losing mass. Those data sets were probably one of the first data sets that came out of India as research.
Mhm.
And now if you say from early 2000s, and there are various institutes in India that are completely involved in glaciological research. They have like huge number of students, probably 200 300 students across India working on different aspects of glaciology, using different data sets. Some use remote sensing data set like the satellite observations, some
Mm,
use the ground data sets, that field observations, some
mm.
use both, some use modeling like me, to understand what's going on. So yeah, now we have a huge interdisciplinary team working on glaciological research.
And we are
But
at
probably the
one
pioneers were GSI. Yeah.
finding bridges. Since you are also on field and you're also in the lab,
Hmm.
what we feel is today we are in wow of the satellite data,
Hmm.
because the satellite is literally catching the number of hair I have on my head, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we're very fascinated with how the data comes out.
Hmm.
But have you gone through an experience where your field data has proven very different from the satellite data?
Yeah, so we have to understand one thing is like satellite data has a direct observation from the top of the sky. I mean, it's looking from top to the below.
Yeah.
So what happens is the kind of perspective it gives you sometimes is not as detailed as the requirement you are in need of. Like, for example, I'll give you, you want to understand how the glacier terminus is changing. So the terminus is the end part of the glacier where it's like ending, and
Okay.
then there is a emergence of a river out of the terminus. So also we call it snout of the glacier.
Hmm.
So if you want to understand what's happening in the snout and you want to have a different vantage point, like you want to look it as a wall of ice
Hmm.
and how the things are changing across,
Hmm.
that perspective you will never get from a satellite, because the kind of angle the satellite is looking at is very different as compared to what you're looking at on field.
So, how do you actually collect this data from the glacier? What are your methods
Yeah,
and means? Help us understand it also from a common man point of view, but
yeah,
also,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, more deeper scientifically to be accurate and not vague.
Right,
But
right.
what I'm visualizing is, that, of course, glacier is not this one spot, where you
Hmm.
put a meter and it's catching that, right? It's an
Yeah,
endless sort of a landscape that goes into.
yes.
So how what form of data are you able to collect today?
So there are multiple aspects of data collection from ground, right? And why is this important? Because there are some data sets that we generate from satellite data. And also, when we model the glacier, the computer models give us some idea of these things are happening. But that's not always true, right? Because whatever the computer is saying, we cannot always believe, because computers also have their
It's
errors. The
simulated.
models
Yeah,
have their own errors. Yeah.
yeah.
So we need to get some data from ground that is the real. We take this, the ground data set is the real that's happening. Now we tell the computer, so the field data set or the ground data set is saying A, but you are saying B. So we try to modify some parameters in the model and try to get to the realistic what's happening on ground. So that's where the importance of the ground data comes. Another aspect is like the geophysical parameters, like the ice thickness or the snow thickness, or what's the density of snow in different parts of the glaciers. So we usually make use of an instrument called the GPR, that is ground penetrating radar. So usually it sends radar pulses that goes to the ice. So usually ice is like uh, you know free to movement of radar pulses. So it will directly go scatter from the bedrock, that's the land below the ice, and again it will come back. So based on the time duration, it goes and comes back to the receiver again. So there is a transmitter and a receiver. The radar pulses goes from the transmitter, touches the bedrock, and again the signal comes back as a reflection. It gets absorbed by the transmitter. So based on the time duration and the velocity of this, we can understand the thickness of the ice. This is again a very important parameter. We model ice thickness. Okay, we model like the computer models give us, but whether the models are giving us correct results or not, we need to understand from these ground observations.
Around. I still have many more, but I guess we will keep it for part two. And
Yeah, yeah.
have I would want to process this myself, and even through the podcast, have our viewers get it like a part one of the
Hmm.
thing. But very insightful, Ditanga. It's like I mean, knowing I'm also present to the fact of how much information overload we have. So a lot of things that you have shared would probably be the one that our audience already knows,
Yeah.
so to say. Quote, like,
Hmm.
okay, it's all there. It's not something that's just come out of your mouth right now.
Right. Right.
But what's been very useful for me as in a conversation with you is to bring in all stakeholders into the same
Hmm.
conversation and be able to visualize very small action points,
Right.
honestly, like, uh, because otherwise सब बातें हैं,
हाँ.
सब
Sorry.
बातें, लाइक मैं और आप गप्पे मारेंगे और हम बोलेंगे गवर्नमेंट को ये करना चाहिए, एंड द गवर्नमेंट विल से तुम ये करो पहले,
Hmm.
you are not sorting that out. So
Sorry.
I do think that in this conversation we have been able to establish the what all small things that we need to do, and that couldn't have come without, that's what I was saying, that without that research and the observation of somebody like you, who's not talking from understanding the problem but being at the end who's trying to solve it little by little.
Right.
So it's
Right.
very informative.
Thank you so much. I hope that I was able to, lucidly make people understand that what's going on, and make simplify it for them to understand the different processes that's going on. Yeah, and let's see. Hopefully, we will have a better future ahead.
I love this discussion, even though it was virtual and it was not like a in-person connection. But the kind of work that Tirthankar is doing and how involved he is into the overall understanding of it makes me ऑल्सो रियलाइज कि ये सारे लोग ऐसे ऐसे प्रोफेशंस हैं जो लोग दूर दराज जगह पे इतना रिसर्च और इतना ऑन ग्राउंड काम कर रहे हैं जो हमें पता ही नहीं होता है. ये जो काम कर रहे हैं ये एक्चुअली मेरे और आपकी डेली लाइफ को ही बेहतर बनाने के लिए होता है. अब सोचो कि एक ग्लेशियोलॉजिस्ट, ग्लेशियर एक ऐसी चीज़ जो आप और मैं बना नहीं सकते, कोई इंसान नहीं बना सकता. इट्स अ नेचुरल फिनोमिना. वो इतनी खतरनाक तरह से रिसीड हो रहे हैं, ख़त्म हो रहे हैं, एक दिन ख़त्म हो ही जाएंगे, एक दिन, राइट. और उसके बाद हमारे पास सोर्स ऑफ वाटर सिर्फ रेनफॉल रहेगा जो ऑलरेडी बहुत डिसरप्टेड है. ये इतनी बड़ी बात है कि हम इसके बारे में क्यों नहीं बात कर रहे हैं, हम क्यों नहीं कुछ कर रहे हैं. दिस इज़ बेसिकली टू मी व्हाट इट मीन्स इज़ कि हमें पड़ी नहीं है. सो आई होप अगर आपने यहाँ तक सुना है और आप मेरे को सुन रहे हो इस वक्त, तो please do listen to Akshay Kaul, who's a landscape architect based out of Delhi, and he talks about how we can prevent our cities from flooding. All that he needs is 5 years times, and India wide this problem can solve. So do listen to him. And then of course you must listen to Rasik Ravindran, who's actually the polar scientist, and he has headed the organization which looks after Antarctica and North Pole. So he has studied how is the earth moving and why, what can be the next 30, 40, 50 years look like. So him. Then you must listen to Pooja Mathur, who's actually just working on sustainability. Looks like just like that, but specifically she is looking at कि कैसे जो हमारी big fat weddings होती हैं उनसे जो हम इतना बड़ा लॉस क्रिएट कर देते हैं जो कि हम खुद भुगत के जाएंगे इसी जन्म में, उसको कैसे वो छोटे छोटे स्टेप से कम कर सकती हैं. सो यहाँ से हम अपने डेली लाइफ के लिए कुछ समझ सकते हैं. इट्स नॉट अबाउट द बिग थिंग्स, इट्स अबाउट दो स्मॉल स्मॉल थिंग्स. Then you could also listen to Harsh Purohit, who is a sustainability consultant, and he advises बड़ी बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को, जो ये मल्टीनेशनल कंपनीज हैं, उनको एडवाइस करते हैं कि वो अपने बिजनेस को कैसे सस्टेनेबल बनाएं, बिकॉज सस्टेनेबिलिटी इज इंटर रिलेटेड. So I hope you're liking it. If you do, keep sharing it with somebody that you think would make sense out of it. Thank you.